Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Soccer. Again, John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back over Leinster's exciting and interesting victory over Munster 27-13. All the other URC action from the weekend, and of course, look forward to our game away to Scarlets on Friday night and the other URC games, and a bit more of the rugby news that has come to the fore. So, boys, 27-13 against Munster, our 12th win of 13 that's been played in the Aviva, our 6th win in the league this season. The machine and the train just keeps rolling on, doesn't it?
It does, and they were lucky to get nil. No, Munster were spirited, if not talented. They gave a good account of themselves in defence, but ultimately they had no real weapons to break us down. And we had plenty of weapons to break them. In fact, should have broken them down. Should have had a bonus point by half time rather than a single try. But credit to Munster on us not doing that and running away with it. And for once the conditions, apart from one, there was a bit of rain at half time, I think. But it wasn't like the I was looking at that actually. The two interpros that we didn't get a bonus point in, it was lashing rain. So, we have an excuse. But Munster, they're not back at the table yet, unfortunately. I think we'd all like it if they were, at least from an Ireland point of view. And also from putting some vitality back into this fixture. It'd be good if they could. So let's give them another while to develop under entry and see if they come back with something more convincing. But they weren't that convincing for me anyway. On Saturday.
Yeah, John mentioned Leinster's weapons. I think part of the problem was that we were doing a lot of load, fire, aim, and then we went back in at halftime and read the manual and realized it was load, aim, fire. And it could have been 21-0 at halftime, or it could have been 21 points to Leinster with 3 tries scored by halftime. And we did more butchering than Kepak, But eventually, we got it together. Munster got a try, and they took it well. There was a great pass actually from Coombs out to Coombs, but it was as a result of a series of Leinster mistakes. So while, as you say, Munster were dogged, and they certainly didn't give up. I don't think they offered all that much with the ball. And something that's been mentioned, and it again came to the fore, is Munster's falling out of games in the second half of games. I don't know, they just don't look to be in the condition that they need to be in right now to play the game that they want to play. Now that's something that'll come, I'm sure. I mean, they're very experienced coaches. They're not idiots, and they know that. But right now, I don't think Ulster have what happened to Ulster last week with the gastro is kind of a bit of a blessing in disguise for Munster. Well, it's not a blessing in disguise; it's a blessing in its own face for Munster, because if Ulster were in the full of their health and went down to Thomond Park, you'd fancy them. Yeah, you'd fancy them to beat Munster, and then Munster would have lost another game. They'd have lost another interpro, and whatever about giving a guy time. Sometimes, with the best will in the world, you can want to give a guy all the time in the world, but if the noise around it gets too much, then there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But I think Munster did catch a bit of a break, funnily enough, with the I don't know if Ulster noticed any strange waitresses carrying coffee pots around around their hotel, but they got the belly anyway.
Left over from World Cup '95.
Yeah, Susie,
that's it. But it's funny, the narrative. I was listening to a few of the podcasts and radio shows. There is kind of a talk of, oh no, we're on the right track. Munster are moving on. They are going to be back to rival Leinster. And it's interesting to hear some people who were very silent at the time, who were in fact criticizing the IRFU for allowing Van Graan implement that clause that he used to get out after agreeing his new contract with Munster. We're very quiet on Munster's inability to move the ball more than 2 phases, more than two passes from the out half. No mention of lack of fitness or conditioning for to play an 80-minute all-court game. But all of a sudden, now Van Gran is gone, new coach in situ. These stories are starting to come to the fore from former players, but very little was said this time last year.
Yeah, I think like a lot of that kind of the hype around green shoots, etc. I think Donal Lenihan fairly put it to bed on Monday night, and Donal, I mean, he played 200 times for Munster. It's in his blood, and he wasn't overly encouraged with what he saw. So that's one tell. The Van Gran years are going to be the tale of the Van Gran years will be told not now. They'll be told in 5 or 6 years' time, whether whether he was a good coach that lifted a poor team up, a bad coach that dragged a good team down, or what I happen to think is the case, he was an okay coach who got an okay team to finish up pretty much where they should have finished up.
Well, you have to think that they
one win from sorry.
I was just going to say briefly that you'd have to think that they outperformed in Europe. They over delivered over the last. They seemed to get to semi-finals of Europe when they had no right to, whereas Ulster would do much better in the league. Munster would save it for Europe and get through on bite and bollock. Maybe I don't know what they were doing it on, but they seem to get through higher in Europe than their league position would suggest over the years.
Maybe the increased competitiveness in the league now, not just from the South African teams, but from the other teams in the league as well, has damaged or harmed Munster in the sense that they can't wing it in the league and save it for Europe anymore. You have to be on it nearly every week. I mean, when you're thinking about, you think about the worst teams in the league. You think about Dragons, you think about Zebre, and Munster had a hard time with Zebre, and they lost to Dragons. So, the URC is a different environment now. But I mean, at the end of the day, all you can ask Munster to do is, the guys went out and they did tackle their best, but they just weren't. They were. I mean, you look at their centre partnership compared to Henshaw and Ringrose. I mean, Henshaw and Ringrose are just on another level entirely.
Yeah. Well, then you'd have to say that Munster did well against them in defence.
But do you not think though that Leinster were spilling chances that 9 times out of 10 they would have scored, like Dan Sheehan dropping the ball pretty much as he was falling over the line.
A little from Colin B.
Jason Jenkins, I think it was, being held up over the line. Conor Murray did very well, obviously, to hold him up, and I think he did it against somebody else. The point being that if they were holding on by their bootlaces, like it wasn't. And if you remember even the build up to their try, it was a spilt ball. It was someone, being in the right place at the right time to hack it through. It's very little creativity in that. Lovely pass play from Coombs to his cousin, but you know what I mean. Like a professional rugby player should be able to throw a pass like that. It's not like that they're creating scintillating back moves from inside their own 22. They kind of lived off Leinster's mistakes and Leinster scraps. And fair play to them, like they held in there, but ultimately we scored. I think it was, they didn't score any points in the final 35 minutes of the game. And we scored 20 unanswered points to them. So,
and that's a recurring pattern this season for them.
But we could have had, like, it was 27-13, it could have been 47-13. And
Cian Healy deciding to try and embed a ball in Jamie Osborne didn't help.
Yeah, exactly. There's another opportunity that under different, or there was another one, I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but he cut back inside. If he had passed the ball to his left, it would have been a try in the corner, but he actually cut back. I might have been Osborne, I can't quite remember who it was, but it was just opportunities that in a different day they would have taken them, and it could have been a very lopsided affair. But fair play to Leinster's marketing team, getting 45,500 people out. It's there's a lot of people who are putting the nails in the coffin of this fixture. They upped the attendance on what it was in the game that we played at the end of May in last year's championship by 13,000. There's a lot of rugby coming up that people have paid. There's 2 sellout international matches. Munster fans obviously have their big fixture against South Africa and Port Coquille. There's even the A international, like, you know, against the New Zealand team.
How's that selling?
I don't know. I heard this. I've seen ads. So
I got 2 terrace tickets for today, so
they're still available.
they're still available. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like, there's a lot of rugby and a lot of tickets to be sold over the next month. So fair play to Leinster for flogging 45,500.
And the thing was, for the first time in a while, in a URC, was certainly not in obviously European games have their own thing, but it felt like a big match. The atmosphere around the ground, in the pubs beforehand, in the ground itself, it felt like a big game. Whereas, you know, there's been a certain sense of, since we came back from COVID, going through the motions. But this felt like proper rugby is back. This is a big game. So, and there was a big crowd there, and it was great to see. And the atmosphere was pretty good. I mean, for a game like that, you're always going to have. I mean, people have, to a certain extent, people complain, and maybe to a certain extent justifiably, about, you know, the amount of people who are there getting up, sitting down, going to the bar, sitting back, not really into the game. But those are the people. If you have 20,000 more people than you normally have, or 30,000 more people than you normally have, and you convert 1% of them, that's 300 season tickets next year. You know, that's the value of these games, that you get people in who mightn't be used to going to rugby, or mightn't be used to going to see live rugby, and they see it in front of them and they go, wow, this is great. All you need is 1% of them, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's you mentioned a couple of excellent performances, just this eccentric combination themselves. But like Ringrose pass out of the tackle for the bonus point try was sublime, really, wasn't it? I mean,
He's on fire.
He is.
Can't wait to see him against South Africa.
He seems to have implemented beast mode in his tackling as well.
He's got Issa Nasiwa. He's tackling above his weight. He's got or what's his name? Bone crusher. What was his name? The he played in 5 World
Chiropractor.
Chiropractor. That's him. Yeah, Brian Lima. So yeah, it's timing. Timing is all. That's how Issa was a master. He just had the timing. He wasn't a big guy. I've stood beside him. He was far from a big guy, but he could tackle like a guy 6'4" and you know 18 stone. He had the timing, and he knew how to hit them, when to hit them, where to hit them, and had it all down. So I think Ringer is getting to that spot now with his tackling. He's just getting the timing just spot on, which is great. And it's great to see him in such good form. I mean, I know you had a few pops in him last year, Dave or Jason, for overlaps and the like. But
I'm delighted to see him passing the ball now.
I think that you're talking about his tackling. I mean, it's timing, technique, and commitment. You know, and that's what he's doing. Sometimes he has been accused, sometimes fairly, of overusing the ball or overholding the ball. But you know, it's not something that was corrected. So it was obviously something that they wanted them to do. You know, they obviously felt that him taking the man on might have been a good chance. Look, I don't know, but himself. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, like, I think sometimes players can be absolutely brilliant at underage when they're playing in school, and they can get away with it because they're playing against fellas of their own age, smaller men, probably not as good because they're the outstanding kid of their generation. And then they go in and they think that they can do it when they're pro, but they can't because they're playing against other fellas who are absolutely outstanding in their generation or in their year or their age grade. And I do think that Ringrose holds on to the ball under the wing a bit too often, and I wish he'd let it out. And if you look, the best centre that we've ever seen is O'Driscoll. And he wasn't afraid to tuck it under his arm, but he was also a fantastic distributor of the ball and was able to give the pass when it needed to be given. But I'm glad to see.
And the thing about Ringrose is, sorry, just to interrupt, Jay. The thing about Ringrose is he's actually an excellent passer.
Well, as we saw it like there for the pass that he gave to Purcell, and like I'm delighted he did it. And you know, I wish he would do it a little bit more. That's just my
Speaking of Purcell, or to give him his real name, Russell.
Russell. Excuse me. I keep calling him Purcell. I don't know why.
He's had a couple of cameos this year and has looked good in them.
Yes.
I was a bit critical of him in the game against Zebre. He didn't play all that well, but he's played very, very well since.
Well, sometimes it's all it takes, you know, a bit of a run. And
Yeah.
He's had a few games now, so mainly due to injury, you'd have to think. He mightn't have got a look in if he hadn't so many back three injuries, but he's you know, these are the things that happen when the.
Well, I actually always think that's a good sign in a young player, a guy who gets an opportunity and just and takes it, you know, rather than, you know, just kind of filling in the shirt. He has been quite proactive in how he's taken his opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he's going to get a couple of chances, or there's certainly a chance next weekend when we play the Scarlets, but we'll come to that. So I suppose there's a couple of big talking points during the game, and both of those were yellow cards for Munster. The first one could have been a red, and the second one for me wasn't a yellow card at all.
I thought they were both yellows. We went through a phase for about 5 years where almost everything was red. But I think watching the summer tests this year, I think that World Rugby and referees have made a conscious decision to downgrade a lot of those. Anything that's borderline is now going to be yellow. Whereas beforehand, anything that was borderline was a red. And I think that's a conscious decision that World Rugby did. I did think the other one was a yellow as well, because, you know, at the end of the day, he didn't have to jump. He was far enough away from the ball. And if you jump, you're out of control. And if you're out of control, you're in trouble for foul play. So, but I didn't think they were anything but yellows, in fairness.
I was quite near the halfway line, and it was quite low down, and it was very close to where it was bang on the halfway line. It was very close to where he landed on top of him. When I saw it in real time, I went, "Oh my God, that is appalling! He's gonna walk. That's gonna be a red card." When I saw it back, I went, "Oh well, actually," because it looked in real time to me anyway, from where I was at, that he just gone in to take him out of it.
Yeah, you look
back, I went, hold on, he didn't go in to take him out of it at all. However, he could have taken his elbow out of the way on the way down. He had a duty of care as soon as he went up for the ball. He's 6'8", whatever he is. He's a big lad. He's a duty of care to not elbow the guy in the wherever his elbow connected.
A lot of things look like red. A lot of things that do look like reds on in real time on first viewing, when you actually look at them again. And I think that's what brought it down. The board, like I say, the borderline calls are now going to be yellow. That's just the way that it seems to be, because I've seen it in multiple games. I mean, you're still going to get guys like Bundyaki still going to get red, because that was red. What's his name? Luisi for Scarlets. That was a red. You've seen him in other games, but I think there's a bit more. I hate using the phrase common sense. You know, people always say, "Oh, we want a bit more common sense in refereeing."
James Gunn soft.
Well, but what they mean by that is that they actually want referees to agree with them. But because people always say we want two things from referees: we want consistency and we want common sense, and those are two mutually exclusive things. You can't have consistency and common sense, because if you're being consistent, every decision has to be refereed the same way. If you're using common sense, you have to take into account the situation and the things that are happening around it. So, but no, I thought he got them right. I mean, he's a pernickety ref, but I think he got the calls right.
I think he's improved hugely, actually.
Yeah, he had. No, I will say that. I no, you're absolutely right, John. He has improved. I mean, he was quite dreadful a couple of years ago, but I think he has improved. I mean, refereeing in Ireland isn't at the highest peak at the moment, but I do think he and Andrew Brace have come on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think actually refereeing in a country reflects the strength of the game in the country.
Sure.
I just I thought that they made up their minds very quickly, like in both decisions. There was, like, you know, there was such high level amount of criticism for how long some games are taking, because of the continual reviews and resets of scrums and TMO interventions and so on, that it was almost a sort of its knee-jerk reaction. Well, oh my God, someone on BBC, someone on Sky Sports or whoever has said something negative towards a decision. Therefore, we have to improve because Stephen Ferris said it, or because Ryan O'Driscoll criticised it.
The refereeing the atmosphere and not the situation.
Yeah, but you know, like I think it's a duty of care that if you're gonna, you can't just rush over and say I'm gonna watch it once and then that's it. Like,
yeah.
You know, as you said, if you want consistency. So therefore, if you're going to watch it 3 times over, you don't need to watch it 5 times or 10 times over. But like, I do think that if you're standing, I don't know, 35, 40 meters away from the big screen, regardless of how big the screen is, a couple of different viewings of an angle rather than just, oh, that's my decision.
Yeah, I think they all have kind of key phrases or kind of trigger phrases that they use between the referee and the TMO.
Yeah.
And the referee will say something, and if the referee doesn't say, "Do you want to look at that again?" Then he'll go, "Okay, I've got this call right," because the TMO's in a better position to see it. He sees all the angles. He's got, you know, he'll have watched it before he's brought it to the referee's attention. So, no, I think he got the. I think all you want from a referee is that they get, you know, because nobody's going to get 100% of the calls right because, you know, they're not infallible. What you want them to do is get all the big or as many as possible of the big calls right, and I think he did.
Yeah, well, like I suppose we probably spoke about Munster's injury list, but like you could really see the difference in the bench when it came on. You know, I thought Porter had a storming game for the 30 odd minutes he played. Conan, like when you bring on someone like Conan, a test line, you know, you're only going to strengthen your team. So it was like really noticeable that our bench came on and really upped the ante and you could see it was probably reflected in the scoreboard, like in those last 20 minutes when we scored our points. Like I have to say now, when I was going through some of the Munster team, there was quite a few names when I was reading them that I'd never heard of before. You know, there was a lot of inexperienced young fellas in that team. I mean, I'd actually suggest that they purposely made a decision when Knox went off to shift across Lockman to the loose head.
Oh, I don't have any doubt that they did that. I mean, Lockman is an experienced player. He has played there before, not very much, because the guy they had on the bench is a young player who's switching across himself. Like French is a loose head himself by trade, and it's only this year that he's decided to go to, or that he's been moved to tight head. So you couldn't in all, you know, we're talking about duty of care, putting him against Andrew Porter would have been, you know, not the right thing to do. So I think they were sensible, but it just show. I mean, in fairness to them, they have corrected the issue this week. It's an issue that they shouldn't have had to correct because it shouldn't have happened in the first place. But with John Ryan returning from Wasps,
yeah, it's good to see a common sense decision.
Yeah. Well, there were two. Although I'm told there were 3, but there were 2 certainly well known to be Irish qualified players, like obviously Ryan and Ollie Morris in the Wasps Worcester fallout, and Munster signed both of them. And as it happens, you can't really blame them they need a centre because they had the whole thing with Farrell, so they had to sign a centre, and Ollie Morris is a centre, and they've had problems they've had the issues with injuries, etc. at tight head, and John Ryan is a tight head, and he's a Munster man, so.
I wonder how that works. Like a guy who, I don't know, did he leave? Was he let go? Was it a bit of both? But he went to, let's say he left on his own and they wanted to keep him. He's over there doing his best for Wasps. He's probably on a few quid. All of a sudden, everything falls apart to no fault of his own, and he ends up back in Munster. Or worse again, Munster didn't want to keep him, and now they're having to go crawling back to him to get him to come back and take them out of a hole. You'd wonder the dynamic of that. I mean, he's a professional player. I'm sure it's not like he's not sulking or anything, but I'm just saying.
It's either that It's either
dynamic.
that or get the old spreadsheets out again, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the situation in Munster that led to John Ryan's release was not unrelated to spreadsheets, in as much as he's 33 years of age. They had to do something to reduce their playing staff. Munster carry a very, very large squad of guys who don't play a lot of rugby. So I think they had to do something in terms of tightening up their squad. He was 33. They looked and they had they'd Keenan Knox, they'd other guys coming through, and they decided, okay, he's going to be. They made an actuarial decision rather than anything personal, but it didn't work out for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully he gets on well with them and gets them through their injuries.
Sticky wicket.
Their sticky wicket. That's the word. Phrase.
Seeing as we're all cricket mad nowadays.
I know.
Jason, your boys took one hell of a beating this morning.
Good.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't.
Well, he's not playing anymore, actually. Yeah, so.
No, he's retired now.
He's retired.
Anyway, he played for Ireland before he played for England, right?
Like
So anyway,
Rice.
exactly. So moving on to our game against Scarlets at the weekend. I would think this is one of the largest amount of outflowing of talent for an international series. There's 17 going off to the full squad. There's 3 in the A squad, and there's about 5. And I'm probably missing a couple of guys. I've got James Lowe, Harry Byrne, Will Connors, Kelleher, Jordan Larmer, and I'm sure I'm missing a few others that are on the physio's bench. So that brings it to about 25 players that are missing. Do you know what I mean? That's an entire match day squad taken out of the equation. But we've still got, obviously, there's still some very talented players in our group, that will play and steady the ship. But it's a big ask going over to Netley, particularly when only 7 of their team has gone to the Welsh team.
And crucially, it's the 50th anniversary of them beating the All Blacks this weekend, and also I think it's their 150th year of rugby in Llanelli. So a lot to celebrate. There's a lot to stand up and fight for. So yeah.
Did you get confused? But you're just saying words now
Teams
because
in red,
beating the All Blacks. It's just got into a stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
But you're writing the music for the play, are you, John?
I must be.
God, a jazz fusion musical. Now that'll be something.
No.
Yeah, no, it's going to be tough. I mean, but then again, if you look at it this way, there's a reason why there's only 7 going off to the Welsh team.
Yeah. Well, they've had a pretty shocking.
And we will have access to the A-team squad players.
Yeah, all 3 of them.
Yeah.
But
Deegan, in fairness, who's looking good. We're going to lose. Obviously, going to use the whole Irish back row, which is a bit unfortunate. But Alex Soroka is another guy who's injured, by the way. Speaking of back row.
Yeah, he'd be a good guy to have right now.
Yeah.
There's a few lads that'll be handy, but when you're losing the full Irish back row, it's great to have somebody like Max Deegan and Rhys Ruddock. Anyone?
Yeah.
Rhys Ruddock is back fit. So there's 2/3 of a back row and Penny is also in the A squad. So there you go.
So I mean, if you look at it this way, I mean, if you have Ruddock at 6, Penny at 7, and Deegan at 8.
Yeah,
that's a pretty high standard back row,
Yeah, that's a great balance.
And you've got to now inform Luke McGrath.
Yeah.
Being bigged up. Why is he not in the Irish squad over
nice little chip on the shoulder for him to prove his worth.
A scrum half with a chip on the shoulder, never. But you'd have, I mean, there's lots. I mean, there is a lot of talent still knocking around the province. People tend to forget that that we have. I mean, second row of Maloney and Jenkins. Anyone?
Yeah,
sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, Keane Healy, John McKee.
No, Keeney's in
He's in the Irish squad.
the Irish squad.
Keane Healy's still in the Irish squad.
They're in it.
Right, so
And so's Ed Byrne.
he's the second best tight head.
Don't think-
Ed
well, Ed Byrne is like-
isn't. Ed
The
Byrne
Burns
isn't. That's
available.
right. Yeah. So Ed Byrne, John McKee, and Michael
I think-
Alatoa.
Hook,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
Hopefully.
Hooker might be a bit of a problem at the moment.
I think McKee's a very underrated player. I think he's a very good player. He was very good the Ireland under-20s. I think getting him was a bit of a coup, to be honest with you.
Mm.
Now I know there's a lot of stuff. I mean, we know how good Ronan Kelleher is. We know how good Dan Sheehan is. They're in the top 5, maybe top 5 hookers in the world right now. But I think getting McKee was a bit of a coup, and I think we'll see a lot of benefit from that because they're going to be away an awful lot.
Mhm.
And particularly,
Well,
like, you
a
know,
lot of
Tracy's
talent at
injured.
Hooker. There was a lot of talent at hooker in those years. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that these were all in the same year, but I know McKee was knocking on the door for a few years.
Yeah.
He got a full academy, he was in sub academy. But like you had Kelleher, Sheehan, McKee, and a chap called Owen Clark who went off to Munster and now with Jersey, I think. They were all, if not in the same under-20s, they were in one after the other. So, and all of those were potentially Leinster academy players at the time. Clark went to Munster. McKee hung around in the sub academy for a couple of years. Keller obviously went straight in.
Was McKee not in the Ulster Academy for a while?
No, he never went into the Ulster Academy.
All right.
Even Dan Sheehan didn't get straight in to the. I think he came in at about 2 months into the season, whatever year it was. So there was a lot of talent coming through at hooker right about the time that, and McKee was right in the middle of it. So, in one way you'd go, Jesus, the guy came down from Ulster, hung around, paid his dues, worked hard, where Ulster can't bloody produce a forward now. I don't know what's going on there. You would have thought he'd have an easier door to knock on up in Ulster, but
Their hooker, actually, their young hooker's a fine player too.
Yeah,
there's
Stuart.
a couple up
Yeah.
there that are young and decent. All right,
Stuart's a very good player.
there you go. Lots of good talent coming through at hooker for Ireland generally, anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one guy I thought was going to be world class, never quite pushed on or hasn't quite yet, was Dylan Tierney Martin
Hmm. Yeah,
over in Connacht.
I've seen his name, and I think I've seen him play. Didn't he play against us?
Yeah, he would have done. Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't know a huge amount. But yeah, it's great to see so many hookers, and your man Heffernan as well in the Irish.
Yeah.
It's good to see, because for a while there it was Rory Best and got had a lot of big games. We had, like, I don't want to slag him off. He's in there now in the squad again. That African chap, Herring.
Yeah.
Like, he's a good, solid player. No problems with the guy. No problems with him being
He's a big player for Ulster, so he is. He really is.
But you'd like to think we've more coming through,
Yeah.
Like if
But he's a guy. If you ever notice, there's always players, and I think Kieran Treadwell is the living example of this. And there's always been others before that you mightn't think too much of them when they're playing. Like you see them playing for Ulster, you see them playing for Leinster, and you can't, or Munster, and why is he always in the? But coaches love them.
Mm.
There's always guys. It was like Kieran Treadwell, like Joe Schmidt loved them, and now Andy Farrell loves them. I mean, there was a lot of talk quite as Simon Easterby, and Simon Easterby was a line, but there was still a lot of talk about why was he always in the Irish squad, because Eddie O'Sullivan loved him, and every coach he worked with loved him. There's always players like that coaches just go, I need this guy around. They're like water players. They mightn't be the best player themselves in the world, but you add them to the mix and it makes everything around them better.
Yeah. Well, look, as I said, I'm not slagging off Rob Herring.
No.
I'm just saying there was a point where there was Rory Best, him, and
there was a kind of a rotating cast of guys under Rory Best. There was Herring, there was Cronin, there was
Cronin got 70 Ireland caps,
Oh, I know,
most of them
yeah.
off the bench.
all off the bench.
Yeah.
And there was what's his name, Scannell down in Munster. There was kind of a rotating cast of guys under Rory Best. Now they all, like Cronin obviously got a lot of caps, a lot, as you say, a lot of them off the bench, but there was a certain interchangeability in terms of the selection.
Like I love Cronin as a player. He was a great player for Leinster. Great
But
player for Ireland.
do you know, I can't remember him making one break like he did a million times for Leinster for Ireland.
Mm.
Like nothing really stands out for me that he made a scintillating break through the centres and linked up with a winger. You know what I mean? Like I just can't remember, even though he played.
Ireland played a lot
gazillion
tighter
times.
game than Leinster
Much
did.
tighter, yeah.
Yeah.
Much tighter. Yeah, and one of my concerns actually about our game on Friday night is our relatively short turnaround. We've got that extra. We've got a day less, obviously, than Scarlets do, but
It's a trouble.
yeah, they have to travel back from Galway. But like we were at such a high last week, playing in front of 45,000 in a big game for us. That meant a lot to beat Munster. You know, it's just to keep the standards that we've set, to keep it up at that level. It's like, Scarlets are pretty poor this season by their standards. They've won one and drawn one of their 6, but you just feel they want to put one up on us. We beat them a few times a couple of years ago in very big games, Pro 14 final and a European Cup semi-final. I think.
Yeah.
Was it a quarter-final?
Semi.
Semi, yeah. That was 2 big defeats.
Sorry, was it a Heineken Cup quarter and a semi of the Pro?
No, it was the final of the Pro.
It was the final of the Pro 14 and it was the semi-final of the...
Yeah, so, but anyway, point being, 2 very big games that we beat them in, crunch matches. Obviously, their team has kind of changed a bit in that time, but I'm sure their coaches are thinking, this is an opportunity for us. Leinster, shorn of whatever, the 17 that are on the senior team, the 5 or 6 injuries. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to get a better chance to take a scalp like Leinster's when all those lads are away. Plus, they're not missing a huge amount of their squad. 7 away with Wales. I'd rather, if I was the Scarlets, I'd rather lose 7 of our better players and lose 25 or 20 odd of the Leinster lads.
Well, I have to say that the guys it's a bit like the All Blacks. You don't want to be on the team that lost to whoever it was that broke the run of game. You know what I mean? Those guys going into the jersey, we're on a possible perfect 7 from 7. The guys who are going over there do not want to let those standards drop. Yeah. They're in there to make a name for themselves. They're going to fight for that.
I think that the interesting part of it is going to be the back line. We're down a lot of players in the backs in particular, and not just from the international thing. I mean, there's a lot of injuries. Say, for example, Jamie Osborne is not going to be available because obviously he has to do the return to play protocols. You've got guys who are injured, guys who are away. So I mean, who's going to play out half? Ross, I suppose. Oh, no. I mean, you're going to need somebody behind that, so there might be an opportunity for maybe Charlie Tector or Sam Prendergast. Yeah. We've obviously got problems on the wing. Dave Carney is apparently back, so but there's still options there in the back 3 as well. There's opportunities for guys like Aitel King, etc.
There's a guy to stick on the wing. He's a big, strong lad. He wouldn't physically wouldn't have a problem stepping up to the senior game.
Well, he was outstanding for the under-20s last season. Yeah. Absolutely outstanding.
But he's a strong player. He's not a kind of willowy little under-20 centre that blown over in a strong wind. He's a
big powerful guy.
Yeah, chap. So I'd see him going straight into senior rugby if he's needed. If he's not injured, and I haven't a clue. The guy could be. Guy could have kind of done his cruciate last week for all I know, but.
And after being bigged up by us, he probably will do.
I don't say that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it should be an interesting game. I suppose the other big game of the weekend is Munster-Ulster match down in Thomond. You made a very interesting point, Dave, just about the Ulster gastro problem that they had. They've obviously had a big journey home from South Africa and then travel down to. So no doubt they'll be fatigued. Both teams roughly missing the same number of players. I think it's 8 apiece going off to the Ireland squad. Not really sure of the players who from Ulster, suffered the most with their bug, but I presume that they're recovering from it and they will be okay for Ireland's selection in a couple of weeks.
Well, on behalf of all the other teams in the top 6 of the league, being completely selfish, you'd expect them to be up for Munster, because Munster are nowhere, and if they took Ulster down a peg or two, so yeah. But how it will be viewed, I don't know. A lot of people in this part of the world just want to see Munster getting beaten. No matter who they're playing, they could be playing Saddam Hussein's
all-star selection. Chemical Ali at half, Uday on the wing,
and they'd still be up for them over Munster. So I personally, I'd be happy to see Munster win it, just to put a bit of a dent in Ulster's dominance at the top of the table, just behind us, and also to give Munster a little bit of cohesion and a bit of focus, because if they start sinking too far, you just be fearful that their season's going to be complete washout.
Nah, it's not the community games, John. I mean, the thing is, I have no idea what kind of team Ulster will be able to put out. I have no idea if who's fit, who's not fit. Obviously, the guys who are away with Ireland are away with Ireland. They have a couple of guys in the A squad, I think, that
Ulster have Human more.
Yeah. So, I mean, getting Hume back would be a big bonus for them. Obviously, they'll be without McCluskey, but they have Marshall, who I think is the form, along with Ringrose, is the form centre in Ireland at the moment. Hume and Marshall together would be quite a good combination,
Yeah.
But currently, Munster are on 11 points, Ulster are on 21. So, if Munster win that game, that gap is going to narrow down, possibly down to, 5 or 6. Whereas if Ulster win and Munster don't pick up a bonus point, that gap is going to be like 14 or 15.
So are you saying that it's squeaky bum time, Jay?
No, I'm just saying that for Munster, you would have to have concerns whether they're going to qualify for Europe.
Oh yeah, no, that is a significant issue. That is definitely a significant issue and a significant concern, I think, in Munster. I mean,
what did that do to their season ticket?
Yeah, they have to qualify for Europe. They really, really do, for their own business, plan or whatever. They really, really do. I don't see this current trough going on too long, but I mean, if they could find themselves 8th and not make it. Because there's no guarantees.
Yeah. I haven't looked at their fixture list over the next sort of 2 months, but like if they've got a tour down to South Africa, if they have, a South African team up in presumably in Limerick.
They're down there when we are at the end of the season, as far as I know.
Well, I wouldn't fancy needing to get points at that part of the season down there.
No chance. No chance. But like their possible exit from Europe or from top tier of Europe is a bit of a blow for their whole season ticket business, because it's based on European games, really. The way they divvy up their season tickets, is kind of less point in buying a season ticket if you're not going to get in for the European games. But
then maybe they should start putting more emphasis on the league and supporting it.
Well, maybe they will.
Or maybe I'm just saying, like, when you look at Thomond Park, it's a beautiful stadium and it's half full, half empty for quite a lot of the league games. Whereas you see, some mid-ranking French teams come into town, or an Exeter or a Bath or whoever is coming, and there's 26,000 tickets sold. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe it's time that the locals got behind their team for the league.
I think they will. I mean, it's a behavior that grew up over the years, and it's not going to go away easily. I think there's a recognition of that in Munster, and I think there's a recognition of that in Irish rugby that, you know, and certainly the last couple of weeks will have heightened that realization that the URC is, you know, a really good league. There are really good teams in it, and we can't be relying on the European Cup. We just can't, because you can't rely on the finances of English clubs. So we have to make our own thing. We have to make it strong. So I think Munster is cognizant of that as anyone else. The question is, but it's a behaviour that's not going to change in the space of a week. I mean, it's going to take a while to do it.
But you know what it will do? It'll make qualifying for it all the more significant. Like if you miss, you don't miss things until you don't have them anymore. And so, like, it's something that, well, I think we've probably spoke about this, but the guts of 20 years ago, Leinster was in a very low ebb, very low place. But what people and what supporters of Leinster did was they got behind their team and they grew from small little acorns, mighty oaks grow. And people got behind. We didn't have a big, mad, sexy run to a European Cup final. When we did do anything, we got turfed out and we went out with our tail between our legs, whether it was Perpignan or Leicester in 05.
Sunday.
When back Sunday in 06, when we were getting that little bit of momentum, we seemed to mess it up. But what the supporters do and what the team grew from and the support base grew from was we got a very good run in the league in 08 when we won it. And all of a sudden, season tickets started to grow on the back of being, we mightn't be great in Europe, but we took the league seriously. And all of a sudden, 09 came, and it was like, wow, this is almost we just weren't prepared for it. But
I think you're 100% right. I always say that, I always say that the current success or the current period of success that Leinster have was born in Stradey Park. That day when we went over, we beat Clonethley on a dreadful day. I mean, I think it was not very much to not very much but it was a sea change moment. It was a kind of a flip switch moment. But I've always said, and I know the IRFU would radically disagree, that the best thing that could happen to the Magners League as it was at the time, or Celtic League as it was at the time, was one of the big three Irish clubs not qualifying. Because that would really re-emphasize to everyone, hey, you've got to look after your domestic business. Because if you don't, there's going to be no foreign holidays.
Bang on, I think. Just a few other little bits. Leinster have agreed an extension with the RDS for a further 25 years. Like, I can't believe it's 15 years since we moved there.
Yeah.
Permanently, like that time is zipped by. But no, there hasn't been any official announcement of any news on the redevelopment. But there was sort of a piece in the Irish Times about it, and they said an announcement is coming in the new year. That's all the information they gave. But hopefully it'll be something positive about the building of the new Anglesey stand.
They sent a guy down to the annual thing that they have in the summer, the supporters club meeting.
Oh, that's the AGM.
Yeah, about three seasons ago, I think. Well, it's obviously before COVID, so 3 or 4 seasons ago. And they explained the plans and how they were going to do it. They were going to build it in sections, and they're going to distribute, say, a quarter of the Anglesey people over to the rest of the ground, and then do the first bit of it and then move, I think, north to south, and do it in about 3 or 4 goes over a period during the season, and obviously have it ready for the big event, the horse show, in August. So, like, plans are there, everything's there, most of the funding is there. Obviously, the bills have gone up hugely, like they've trebled, I think, since it was originally. The cost of building has trebled since they originally put the thing together back, I don't know, 8 years ago now, is it?
Yeah.
Seems a while anyway.
I think it's about 8 years ago. So, it's gone from 20 million to 60 million or something like that, roughly. So, the more, like there was a government grant to cover nearly half of it at one stage, but then that's probably less than a third of it now. So
I think part of it as well is at the moment with austerity around and cost of living and fuel prices and this and that and that. I don't think the government wants to be coming out and mentioning any large capital plans that aren't for housing, basically, because you'll always have, despite the fact that sport and cultural activities are vital to the health and mental health of a society. So you have to spend money on sporting and cultural facilities. But you'll always get, that doesn't make headlines. What makes headlines is government spends 80 million on housing, on sports and cultural facilities when so and so many people are homeless. So the government has to be careful about when it announces these things and how it's done. So they weren't going to do it on what was basically a closed event. I mean, it was just a website article more than anything, with a bit of a video. It wasn't exactly a presser. So it'll be announced and it'll be done and it'll be slow. I mean, I know people get annoyed with the RDS because it's a bit old. Well, it's actually very old. It's a bit rickety. Well, actually, it's very rickety. And they see, other clubs have other stadiums, boring cookie cutter stadiums though they are. They're still new and they're shiny, and they want some of that. I like there's things about rugby that I miss that have gone away. Do you know what I really miss? I miss Northampton's hedges. Do you remember the hedges Northampton used to have in front of the stand? They're gone now. I miss those. And I'd miss the hedges in the RDS. So, I mean, it'd be dead easy if everyone was to build the exact same stadium as Thomond Park or, those kind of cookie cutter stadiums. You need to keep something that's a bit unique and a bit different. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't take this as a suggestion that we don't develop the RDS, but I think we still have to keep in mind that there is something. You have to keep the uniqueness in every.
But if you're charging top whack.
You have to provide top facilities. Absolutely. I agree with that completely.
But I'm just
sidelining more than anything. Really.
The views and the access into the Anglesey stand is actually really poor. Yes, it is. It's obviously quite expensive if you're buying a season ticket for in there. There's stanchions in your way. There's only about 4 entrances in, so you've got to scoot along a very long row. And
the seats are made for skinny equestrian arses, not fat rugby ones.
That's very true too.
I find the seats there really cramped.
Yeah.
Look at what happened to Thomond Park though. Seeing as we're mentioning it, they redeveloped right at the wrong time, like smack on the cusp of the crash. So they built a stadium for a Celtic Tiger, and
but
John, that was hubris. That was hubris. That stadium would have been delivered on time and on budget if they just sold the naming rights. It was just pure hubris that they didn't.
No, I understand that.
But John, it opened in 08. Yeah. Their team died in 09.
I understand that as well.
Like that's the main
in history. It's sitting there as a lesson to us all.
No, but
don't build in a recession. Don't build a big stadium in a recession.
But there's isn't really the point is that if Munster was still successful, that stadium would be considerably more filled for each home game. But when your team isn't winning, it's very hard. Like nothing succeeds like excess, or as in Scarface, nothing exceeds like excess. But so a successful team is going to generate bigger crowds, more money. Like that's the reality of it.
But the other reality is though, Jason, there's no guarantees in sport of continued success. You have to plan. You have to plan for the trough as much as the peak.
But what you have to.
And the Munster branch didn't do that. They built the stadium too big. They removed all the scarcity value of the tickets.
Yeah.
And Munster Rugby themselves only wanted, I think, 22,000. But the Munster branch insisted on 27,000 because they could sell those extra 5,000 seats until they couldn't. And then you had no scarcity value whatsoever. So there was no pressure on tickets. And that also affected season tickets and things like that. And like there's a line from Men Behaving Badly that I often quote: when there's always biscuits in the tin, what's the point of biscuits?
Yeah, well, you'll see Connacht have also announced their new stadium has been developed. I think they're going to knock down or redevelop the Celtic, the Clan Terrace with a new 7,000 seat stay or 7,000 capacity stand on that side, and also have a kind of an indoor training facility with an indoor pitch. So that's pretty good for them. Looks like they're plowing ahead with. They did get a lot of funding from the government, and fair play to them for kicking on with that.
The government must be shocked to be giving out, grants and funding in Galway that isn't to a man who knitted his own denim.
Yeah, but it just goes to show how that. I mean, I can remember standing, I'm sure a lot of the people who listen to watch this, of standing on the old terrace before there was a roof, before there was, when it was just literally a few steps on the side of the dog track, with a few hundred people, like maybe 300 or 400 people at a Leinster Connacht game, and they've certainly progressed.
I remember that day, and I remember that I used to prefer it to be raining in Connacht, because if it was dry and windy, all the sand got whipped up in your face.
And little particles of dog poo.
Yeah, so I've always preferred a bit more to be damp down there. But yeah, I mean, good for them. I mean, Galway. I mean, they seem to be cutting their cloth as well to fit. So it'll be interesting. I mean, when the sports ground is full and they've the terraces at either end, the mini stands at either end that they put up for the big games, it's quite an intimidating cauldron of a venue.
With a lot of booing.
Yes.
One other little bit of news. I'm delighted to see our old friend Michael Cheika leading the Lebanese rugby league team to defeat Ireland, and they're teeing up a potential quarterfinal against Australia. Wow. And that match will be 2 days before Argentina, I think, play England. So, it'll be a busy few days, maybe a Concorde involved for Czechs to get from. But he'll certainly be very busy, and probably have to.
I don't think he's going to need a Concorde to get from Wigan to Twickenham now, Jay. I know the north is sometimes like a different country to English people, but I don't think it's quite.
Maybe not. But anyway, he certainly will have to curtail his celebrations to get back to the Argentinian lads.
Yeah, no, I watch it because I do watch a certain amount of rugby league, and a lot of the talk was, how Ireland were slight favourites for that game. But there's a rule I take when I'm watching these games between teams that aren't England. Well, actually, between teams that aren't Australia and New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Who's got the most NRL players, and they're the team that's going to win.
Absolutely, that's the only way you can judge it.
Yeah, Lebanon had the most NRL players. I mean, Ireland weren't. I mean, Ireland had a full team of professionals. I mean, with a lot of between NRL, Super League, and the whatever they call it now, the Championship or whatever it is in England. But the team with the most NRL players wins.
That's a good. My bookie needs to know that as well. Well, anyway, boys, as ever. Do we have any questions, Dave?
No, because I didn't ask for any.
Okay. And when are we going to do our live?
We're going to go back to live soon.
Okay.
Because I enjoy the frisson of live performance.
Yes. we can.
Oh, do you not want to talk about your favourite subject, Connacht documentaries?
Oh, yes. Well, I was interested to see the Connacht have got one coming out. It's going to be aired, I think, on RTE. So then a tweet from Red Bull. They must be one of the sponsors of it, but think it's going to be aired sometime in early November.
Yeah, they have their own sports-based television channel, and I think they're the ones who made this. These things can blow up in your face. I know that you in particular, Jay, I didn't mind so much, but you were really unhappy with The West Awake. You thought, will they ever stop whinging? As I recall, was your take at the time. But I mean, look, this kind of thing is very, very on the zeitgeist at the moment. You've got the All or Nothing series. I don't know if you watched the one with Arsenal. I know you didn't. You guys didn't. The one with Arsenal is really, really good because you get to build up a relationship with the players and you kind of begin to take an interest. The Wrexham one is very, very successul on Disney Plus.
There's a Formula One which is huge as well.
Yeah, there's Formula One. So that's the kind of that's where that kind of segment of sports related entertainment is going. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope it goes well for them because I think there's a few interesting characters in that team, and I'd love to see all the Castleknock lads.
There's a few of them there now. Anyway, I think it was filmed last season though. So
yeah, so just the one then.
Yeah, just the one. Yeah, so it should be good. I'm looking forward to watching it. I think it's on. Is it RTE?
It's on. Yeah, it'll be on RTE and Red Bull TV.
Very good. That should be good. Anyway, boys, as ever, thanks a million. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook, Twitter, please give us a like, thumbs up, and a subscription. Cheers. Thank you.